Hello, everyone. Welcome to Not Us podcast, hosted by two sisters, myself, Angela, and that hottie over there, my sister, Sam, where we discuss change, choices, and celebrate all the messy in between bits.
We're not licensed doctors, therapists, gurus, or witches. The stories and opinions expressed in this episode are our own, for entertainment only, and subjected to change. Swearing is possible. And remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe.
Yes. Thank you as well to everyone who is already subscribed. It's so lovely to hear your conversations and to be engaging with you. And it's amazing that you are finding some of our topics to be helpful. So, how does it get better than that, sis? So, for today,
I'm really excited about today's episode. We are speaking about, well, I'll tell you what we're speaking about in a second, but why I'm really excited about this episode is because it is a viewer or listener requested episode.
yes.
Our first. Thank you to
Yay!
the community for participating. And today we're talking about the pause,
Mm-hmm.
menopause,
Menopause,
menopause. And we're going to speak
which
about premenopause, perimenopause, and postmenopause. Because the one thing about me is I like the terminology to be correct.
that's right. I, on the other hand, am happy to use loose phrases. So I refer to menopause, certainly for myself, and this I stole from a reel, but I like to refer to it as adult puberty. That makes me feel better about drinking tequila first thing in the morning when we're recording. Just so you know, I don't do that every day.
Just a disclaimer, we do not drink daily. Tequila is not part of our daily habits.
In fact, we're
Happens
pretty much teetotalers, the two of us, except for this
except for these
not us
episodes.
tequila now. Yes. Anyway, so we digress but yes, you call it menopause, you perimenopause, postmenopause, you like all the great terminology. I am going with adult puberty for myself.
Okay. So, the point of today's episode, because this is a topic that we could spend about 20 hours discussing, is really just to bring awareness around perimenopause and menopause so that our listeners are aware of what's going on within themselves, how we have tackled the topic of perimenopause for myself, postmenopause for yourself, and we will provide resources that we use in terms of educating ourselves just as a starter. So, this is really very much an awareness episode. Now,
Yeah.
if you're not watching and you're listening, Angela gave me quite big eyes. So, when I said she was going through postmenopause, and so I'm going to
What?
take a moment just to explain to my wiser sister why I said she's in postmenopause and not menopause.
I'd love to
Right?
hear this explanation. Thank you, my
So,
dear.
let's first start with what menopause is.
Mm-hmm.
Menopause is the state where a person, a woman, has outlived her ovary function. The factory has closed, essentially. And so a lot of thinking was that only human women and 4 whale species experience menopause, but this is actually not true. And every species that's in captivity will experience menopause, where they've outlived their ovary function or their reproductive function. Point number one. Point
Mm-hmm.
number two, there are in a female born individual, she'll go through 3 phases from puberty, which is premenopause. So before you start any decline in your sex hormone levels, perimenopause, which can start about 6 to 10 years before menopause. And then menopause is a day, it's just a milestone that says you have not had a menstrual cycle for 365 days. The very next day, the 366th day, you are considered to be in postmenopause. So, menopause, the terminology that we use to describe the change and what most women will eventually go through if you live long enough, is actually called postmenopause. So when you are in the stage before and you're still having a menstrual cycle, it might be irregular and has a number of symptoms. That's called perimenopause. It's the decline of your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Once you stop having a menstrual cycle, you are in postmenopause.
Right. So I am
Mm.
actually post menopause. That's really lovely. I feel young and rejuvenated by this conversation. This is why I love chatting to my baby sister. Can I just can we just give you a little bit of context of what we're talking about here? Not that I'm actually, 700 years old and have had great plastic surgery. I went into menopause. Mine was medical menopause. So it was induced when I had chemo and radiation for cervical cancer. And so my ovaries, for all intents and purposes, were nuked. And I remember driving down the road one day, not having had any real perimenopausal symptoms. I was 41 or something. I mean, it was early days, early 40s, and coming down the road and suddenly getting this unbelievable hot flush and this rage that overcame me in the car. And I was sitting next to my spouse at the time, and I remember just saying, "It's nothing you've done, but you're going to need to be patient with me right now because I feel like I could kill something." It was no provocation. No one had done anything, but I just had this huge surge. And then straight away went into not really being able to sleep, waking up during the night, all of the full symptoms that are associated with menopause. The reason that, even though I've had this, well, now that I know it's called postmenopause, but while I've been through this change for about 11 years now, why my sister knows more about it than I do is because that's where we are very different. I have this experience also 10, 11 years ago. These conversations weren't happening. I just knew that, okay, well, I knew this was going to happen because my ovaries were going to stop functioning. And I knew I had to choose between having HRT or suffering. And because of my own natural approach to the body and healing and all of those things, even that debate was massive for me because I was like, oh, I'm going to put this terrible thing into my body that's so dangerous to have. And, I've got to find the best version of it. Is it the pill or the gel? What's not going to basically destroy me? Because that was the conversation that was being had at the time. So I just was like, I'll find what works and just do that. Fast forward however many years later, and my darling sister is starting to hit the perimenopause situation. And I get a message from her saying, tell me everything about your menopause experience. I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to hear? And so she embarked on a great study, which you can tell us about, which is why she is the wiser of the two when it comes to this. Mine is just my personal experience.
I was waiting for you to stop, and then I was going to say, and that's the episode. So we've covered all the topics. Maybe let's just rewind back a little bit. Um, but a great recap on what we're going to be discussing. First thing is postmenopause or menopause does not make you old, because menopause can happen between, or postmenopause can happen between the ages of 45 and 55, is a normal age for a woman to experience menopause, right? Anything before that, some women could go into menopause at 35. That's considered early menopause. But between the ages of 45 and 55, that is normal by Western standards to be a normal age range for menopause. And as I said earlier on, perimenopause can start 4 to 10 years before that. Again, menopause being 365 days of no menstrual cycle. So it can start even, if you experience menopause at 45, you can start perimenopause at 35. And so it's definitely not an age element. And they're doing a lot more research in terms of what brings on early menopause or later menopause, etc. And yes, we do have a very different approach. The fortunate part of being the younger sister is that I have two sisters that have gone through. One sister has gone through perimenopause and is also in postmenopause. And then, of course, Angela as she just explained, has gone through menopause due to medically induced menopause. And so our mum went through the same thing. So she had a hysterectomy, and that brought on her menopause. So she didn't experience perimenopause. But true to my nature, if there's something that is going on, I will investigate, I will ask questions. And so Angela received a message saying, "Hey, apparently I've started perimenopause. Can you tell me what your journey was like and how you came about deciding what route to take?" My mom got this message. My other sister got this message. All of my aunts got this message. And Angela provided me with some material to look at. I then also started looking at just improving my knowledge about what was going on. And you touched on some symptoms, and the symptoms that I had that actually led me to go to a doctor who they cannot do a test for you. There's no test that can be done to say you're in perimenopause. So just understand that. What sometimes doctors do is they'll take a test to get a baseline. But if they test you 4 times in a day, you'll have different readings. So there isn't a test that you can do to establish whether you are in perimenopause. But one of the things that got me to the doctor was I'd had an abnormal menstrual cycle, even though throughout my life I've not had a very regular menstrual cycle. So I've always had a very irregular menstrual cycle. Sometimes I would not menstruate for 9 months, 4 months, or there'd be long breaks between my menstrual cycles. But what got me to the doctor is that I'd had an irregular menstrual cycle. They tested to see if there were maybe fibroids. There wasn't. And then a younger doctor said to me, "Oh, well, you're probably going through menopause, but we'll only know when you haven't had your menstrual cycle for 365 days. And my response was, "The hell we will wait for that because my life is not changing." And so I went on this little journey of discovering. And then I went back to the doctor's practice, but I went to an older doctor and I sat down opposite her and said, "These are all of my symptoms." And the hardest symptom for me was actually musculoskeletal pain, like getting out of bed. I felt like I was 80 years old. My joints were always sore. And that's a symptom that a lot of women, like over 70% of women, will experience, but it's not a symptom that is often associated with menopause, and we don't really speak about it. And so I said to her, really struggling to go to gym. I know that I need to go to gym because I'm overweight, but just to get out of bed, my body's sore. And then I'd also all of a sudden just felt like the energy and the fire that always motivate me just wasn't igniting. It felt like the embers were there, but my inner energy just wasn't igniting. And I said, I've had mental health issues in before, so I understand depression. This is not depression. This is something else. I feel blue. I said, "It's the only way I can say this. It's not that I'm depressed. I know that it's not in my head, but I feel blue. I just feel like life is just ambling along and it's like bleh." And then I said to her, "I haven't come to the Netherlands to put my career on hold and for my life to stop functioning as I always have. So I am looking for a partner who is going to journey with me through this experience." And this poor Dutch doctor must have looked at me and thought, "What a flippin' lunatic in front of me." But I had done a little bit of research. I was clear that I needed to advocate for myself, and she was gonna be my partner in this. And I was really fortunate, and it's probably because she, I would assume, has gone through menopause and perimenopause, understands how impactful it can be on a woman's life. And so without a lot of hesitation, she said to me, "Okay, we can start you on HRT," which I was quite clear that I was going to go on. And so she said, "Well, we can start you with HRT." I initially started with the spray. And the first day that I took that spray, my musculoskeletal pain disappeared. And so that was a win for me. There are some symptoms that even though I'm on HRT, and I'm almost
Mm.
on HRT for 2 years, and we're not promoting HRT. This needs to be a choice that you take. Angela's taken HRT, I'm on HRT. Our other sister has chosen not to go that route. So it really is what's right for you and what you need to in terms of going through this experience. But for me, I wanted to have as fewer symptoms and impact on my life as possible, holding on to youth for dear life. And
And
so,
clawing.
but there are other symptoms that I have not been able to, that the HRT hasn't helped with. So in my investigative approach, we're looking at how do we solve that. Now, it feels like I went on a long discussion there. So is there anything that you want to like bring in before we go into maybe like some symptoms that people might not be aware of, but actually are part of perimenopause?
Yeah, I think maybe I should ask, as we go into the symptoms, which do you think for you has been the worst symptom that you've experienced or that you are experiencing in perimenopause?
So initially it was the musculoskeletal pain that I was experiencing because it really, I just felt uncomfortable in my own body. But maybe a slightly more private symptom is vaginal dryness. I actually thought I had an STD and I
Mhm.
wasn't going to the doctor to check it out because I've been in an 18-year relationship. So there would only be one way that I could have had an STD. And I didn't want to go into that conversation. But it vaginal dryness, and it's even though I'm on HRT, it still hasn't really resolved that. And I know that sounds like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? But remember, your estrogen is lowering, and your estrogen receptors are throughout your body. And so
Mhm.
you become a little bit drier. And I can feel like dryness in my eyes, itchy ears. Like I've never had issues with my ears in my life, but for the last 3 years, itchy ears. And so it's all those areas that are quite impacted by just even a slight change in your hydration or blood supply or blood flow. So, not that I want to be on record for this particular symptom, but in terms of being honest and destigmatizing some of the symptoms, I would say that dryness is definitely a symptom that does impact your life.
Yes. So maybe I can just pick up from over there and just say vaginal dryness is actually one of those that's so it impacts so many women because that's not something that's just your own body aching. It's not confined to you, but that impacts your partners. For a lot of women, it means painful intercourse or whatever that might be. And a lot of people have such shame about it. So thank you for sharing that. We've all experienced that. And thankfully for me, when it comes to that, I have a great product that I use, and that's been a game changer. So these things sound really awful, but there are so many wonderful things available today to help us as our bodies change. And I think also as we talk about these things is to remember that this is the natural part of a woman's life. Just the same as I know I joke about cougar puberty, the same way as you go through puberty in your teenage years. This is just that it's the same as that. It's the body doing hormonal changes. And there's just such a reminder for me that it's not that we're sick. And there are much worse things that can happen to your body in your life. It's a natural thing. And the great thing that's happening now for us is that women are talking, specialists are talking about it. We are having open conversations about things that were shameful and we could never talk about before. So thank you for bringing that one up. What are the symptoms? Symptoms for me, maybe I can say the one that I'm the least fond of is the brain fog because my brain has been always been really sharp especially as having a career as a performer, reciting lines and, anything that I'm learning. If I'm having to recite things that I've learned, that's fine. But anything that's free flowing that requires my brain to, in the moment, conceptualize and then speak, the journey from the thought to my mouth seems to be quite impacted. And so suddenly, if someone asks me to answer a question really quickly, particularly at work, it feels like I don't actually know what I'm talking about, but my brain is catching up because I was in another place. And suddenly I'm like, okay, wait, I need to go back to that file. Blah, 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 go file. Oh, okay. And it takes a moment. So that gap between being able to answer quickly and the question has elongated for me. So that's probably for me the one that I'm the least appreciative of in the changes.
Yeah. You said a couple of things that made me think of a number of topics. The one podcast that I listen to that is not a doctor's podcast, but she brings on great guests, including Dr. Kelly Casperson, who has written a book called The Menopause Moment, is the Tamsin Show. So she a wonderful podcast you can find her on YouTube and Spotify, etc. And she brings in a lot of different female doctors who speak about everything from menopause to mental health, etc. But what's interesting about Dr. Kelly Casperson is that she is advocating for, in the US, for female testosterone. So there are only 4 countries in the world currently. I think it's the UK, South Africa, Australia, and there is a 4th country that have female prescriptive or is female testosterone. So testosterone is a sex hormone that a woman has. Estrogen is our main sex hormone. But in terms of like just being able to get out of bed, you need testosterone for that. So it's that go hormone. But a woman uses about 1/10 of an amount that a man needs. And so in the US, what happens is that if you do get to a point where a doctor will prescribe testosterone for you as a woman, and sometimes you might need that as an HRT supplement, it's up to the patient to figure out what 1/10 of a tube is. And so that she is advocating that the FDA actually put a lot more effort into developing and getting it passed for women, and that it's not seen as a luxury, but it's actually part of your health as it is seen for men. So men who have low testosterone, HRT is seen as not as a supplement, but as a chronic medication that's required. Second thing that I wanted to say is you're 100% correct in that I'm experiencing perimenopause in a day and age where there is so many people that are advocating for better education around menopause and women's health beyond our fertility age. And a scary stat is that for most doctors, they only spend about 4 hours during their training on menopause. So I
Wow.
want to put that into perspective. That is 4 hours out of a 7 or 10 year or whatever it is study program that's dedicated to understanding what half of the population will experience should they live beyond their ovary function. And we are living longer and longer. So more of us are going to be going through perimenopause, postmenopause, etc. And women are at higher risk for cognitive issues later on in life. So dementia, women are at a higher risk for dementia, osteoporosis, and heart disease. And that is because of the declining estrogen levels in our body. And of course, HRT helps with this. But again, a disclaimer, we're not pushing HRT. You've got to do your own education. The purpose of this particular episode is to direct you in terms of where you can find information. So one of those shows is the Tamsin Show, and Dr. Kelly Casperson is a doctor that speaks about testosterone, women's sexual health, and as well as perimenopause and menopause. Great resources.
Yeah. I really love the work that as well in terms of those resources. A few years ago when I was flying, I saw on one of my flights between the UK and South Africa a series that the BBC had done with Davina McCall on menopause. I think that's one of the ones I shared with you. The woman that wrote that series and who is the author and the researcher behind the work, Kate Muir, does incredible conversation on all of the options. I actually run a menopause program for women in the corporate space that I'm in, and we've had her on to talk about that and the ongoing research. And so it's horrific to me that such a small amount of time is given to this topic, or was in the past. I'm sure that that's going to be changing dramatically now that it's been called out on something that is so significant, because in that program, you hear of women who can no longer do their jobs because of menopause. So they're actually losing their income. women that have gone to prison for committing violent crimes because their hormones are raging so much that that they've actually hurt someone else. There are lots of extreme cases. So something that's really important as society to address, and not to just be kind of okay with half of your population being impacted by something that actually has an effect on everyone around them. Because a lot of women who are in perimenopause have got young children or teenage children, and they're also having to negotiate what's going on with your hormones going everywhere and potentially, you know, losing your cool, literally, with hot flashes and emotions and everything, or at least just not being stable. I don't want to make light of that, not feeling yourself and feeling really stable. So we'll keep sharing some resources, but Kate Muir's work is some that I really enjoy as well.
And I think not knowing who to speak to about what you're experiencing, because the symptoms are so vast and some of them are so unknown, your primary physician or GP or house doctor, whatever it might be referred to, wherever you're listening. So just trying to cover South Africa, the UK, and potentially the US in terms of what you call a house doctor or a GP, might not be aware of all of the symptoms, might not be aware of what you're experiencing. And what we are seeing in a number of doctors that I follow, these are women that have actually shifted their specialization after having gone through perimenopause and menopause themselves, and are now strongly advocating for change within the medical governance and structure and learning within the US. I don't unfortunately follow any UK or South African doctors. These are mainly American doctors. But just in terms of their own education, how doctors 20 years ago would say, "Oh, you're dealing with a weeping woman," or women were being put into institutions because of hysteria. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for women in the 50s, 60s to be institutionalized because they were not acting normal any longer. And so they were booked for hysteria. And I know that even myself as a younger woman, I didn't have a lot of compassion or understanding for what women at this stage of their life were going through. But no one was speaking about what women were going through. And so, yes, you may have had terms thrown around like, oh, she's going through menopause, or, it's the change of her cycle. But the women the generation before us were not speaking about what they were going through. Because, of course, who were they going to speak to? Their partners? No. Maybe they were speaking with their girlfriends. Maybe they were just trying to like figure shit out for themselves and thinking that they were an island going through this alone. So we live at a great,
Yeah.
great time to be going through this experience where there are a lot of people in positions of power who can advocate for us. But just to drive this point home, you have to do your own education, your own understanding of what is happening with you, and you have to advocate for yourself. This is the time to stand up for yourself and say, this is what I need. Don't be bullied by your doctor. Often women are prescribed antidepressants. Antidepressant is only going to help with a symptom, one of your symptoms. But it's important to understand what those symptoms might look like and what is the best course of action for you.
Yeah, and there's loads of things that can help as well, that we can help ourselves with in terms of diet, exercise, mindfulness. There's so many things that we have and that we know now that the research is showing will help with those symptoms. If you're choosing, whether you're choosing to take HRT or not, that can supplement that as well. I think of myself even being really quite calm in a lot of situations. And people have often been, oh, because you're a yogi and you're so calm. And then I'll have another moment where I am completely wild and just irrational. And as you've seen, sister, usually on a Friday afternoon when I'm at the end of the week. And then you end up having this really huge kind of out of character response. What follows that is shame and feeling guilty and just all kinds of questions around that. And so I think it's such a complex cycle that if we just have some compassion with ourselves and our bodies and try and support ourselves as best as possible by educating ourselves and trying things and then trying other things. So when I first tried HRT, I took the tablet form just for a week. I had such a bad reaction to it. It was absolutely awful. After that, I tried patches, much better for me, but then I didn't really like the stickiness on my skin that would often be there. And then I moved on to the gel form, and I much prefer that, but there's also that sort of spray pump. So it's not like there's only one option to try within that world as well. There are options, the same as if you choose not to have HRT. There are loads of supporting things that you can do for yourself, but speak to the specialists who deal with that on a daily basis. And as my sister's alluding to it, that might not be your general practitioner. Do some more homework. Speak to the people who are really working with this every single day.
Yeah, going armed with information and resources. I do want to say before you move on, sis, nothing gives me greater joy than to watch my older, calmer yogi sister lose her rag, which she has done a couple of
Unravel.
times. Pretty much every episode that we record, there is a meltdown with technology. Oh, it just gives me so much joy because you've never heard language like this. And Angela, she looks like an angel, but that tongue, mm, yep,
I'm
makes me
just
happy.
blaming it on the menopause.
Um, just
Nothing to do
in
with my
terms
own bad behavior.
in terms of HRT, so I'd said that I started with the spray. And as you go through the cycle, you might have to switch out your HRT. So the spray was wonderful for me for the first 3 months, but I have now spent the last 21 months using the patch, and that works well for me. But I am making an appointment with my poor suffering doctor just to discuss how do we check that things are working as they need to. I now need additional support and supplement, but I go in prepared with what it is that I want to know from her. So, can I use this as an addition? Or at which point do we check that? Because when you are on estrogen patches, you need to take a progesterone tablet with that. And that's to protect your lining and to make sure that there's no buildup of lining, which can impact or can result in abnormal cells and cancer. But that's why it's a balance of progesterone and estrogen. And of course, your doctor will provide the correct dosage. But again, we're going to keep saying this. We are not doctors. We're only providing you with information that we've used in having informed conversations with our doctors. As Angela said, the conversation might not be right for your GP or your house doctor. It might be with a gynecologist. Dr. Mary Claire Hever, she's another great resource that I follow on Instagram, and she's been on the Diary of a CEO. There's a great 2 parts episode on the Diary of a CEO. Watch it. It's great. It's got Dr. Von der Wright, another doctor that I follow, Dr. Mary Claire Hever, Dr. Stacey Sims, and there's a fourth doctor, all discussing menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, how to prepare your body not only going through the change, but for your 70s and 80s. And then coming back to what you just said about how important exercise is. And for most of us, and definitely those of us who've had mothers that were in their prime in the 80s, it was about looking good and being skinny and as thin as possible. Muscle is so important for women as you get older. And you only develop muscle up until about the age of 28. Thereafter, it's about maintaining your muscle mass because it starts to decline. And so I do not run any longer. I'm in the gym 4 days a week and I'm pushing heavy weights. Why? Because your muscle will also support your brain, your body, your heart as you get older. And I don't know if we touched on this, but dementia, osteoporosis, and heart disease are 3 of the leading causes of death for women as we get older. And so it's super important to be building out your muscle because your muscle will start to feed your brain. It will protect your bones. Exercise is super important. Protein is really important, and you've got to think about how you get your protein sources. You've got to think about how you're supplementing your protein intake, because that becomes a lot more important for women as we start to age. Protein and fiber are super important. Dr. Mary Claire has got a book called The Gavison Diet, where she recommends that you should have about 40% of your diet should consist of fiber, because that's really important in terms of flushing out your system. Because as we get older, inflammation is not processed by our body as quickly as it is when we're younger. We just don't have the hormones to keep our body in check, and so inflammation can rise, and that has an impact on so many different things. Sis, it looks like you wanted to say something, and I went off on a tangent.
No, I was just no, not at all. No, I just wanted to say a lot of the times women just don't know what questions to ask. And that's the time you can actually go to ChatGPT or Copilot or, whatever AI you use and just chat and say, these are my symptoms. This is what I'm experiencing. You can really have a conversation with ChatGPT and say, what do I ask my doctor? It's amazing the kind of information that you can get back and advice on the next steps. Because even things as simple as I've just recently changed my progesterone dose. In South Africa, the prescription that I had was different than the protocol in the UK. So when I got here, the doctors were like, this is the UK protocol. So I had to change and have less progesterone. And then, of course, my whole body was impacted by that. Then I was taking a different medication for something else completely. And then my doctors called to say, that particular medication impacts your progesterone. So we need to up that. So now I've doubled my progesterone back to what I have in South Africa. And then, for me, it affects my breasts and the discomfort and the bloating and the swelling and things like that until it settles down. So what it is that, again, coming back to change, sis, where we say we are constantly changing, evolving. So even when it comes to something like HRT or not HRT, over the years, it'll grow and move. And as research becomes available, there's changes that happen. So if you've been doing the same thing for the last 2 years with your HRT or whatever else you're using, this might just be a reminder to check it out, see if that's still working for your body. Are you experiencing more symptoms, whatever that might be, and just kind of have a refresh and see if it's still all working for you. If it's not broken, no need to fix it, but it's always a good time to relook at your diet, your lifestyle, what you're doing to support yourself as a human, mentally, physically, and spiritually.
The one thing to say is that you are the expert of yourself. No one knows what is normal for you other than you. And so when you are sitting in front of a doctor or anyone else, and if they say to you, well, it's normal for da 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 da, no, you know how your body functions. And when doctors are speaking about like, this is the normal cycle or this is normal, it has to be related back to what is normal for you. If we look at like skipped periods or your menstrual cycle, what has always been your normal in terms of menstrual cycles? Some people have a menstrual cycle of 21 days, and other people might have a menstrual cycle of 42 days. But especially when you get into your 40s, you've had many months or many years of establishing what your baseline is. And so if there's a symptom that you've never had before, and now all of a sudden you have it, that is an indication that something in your body has shifted, and you should investigate it. And so we could go over the 34 most common symptoms, but every single one of us might have a symptom that is not on that list, that is absolutely associated to perimenopause or change in your life. The thing that I want to land with everyone is that it doesn't matter where you are in life, the one thing that you are an expert on is yourself and your body and what is normal for you. And that's the point that you start to advocate from is, my body has never responded like this. It's now acting this way. It's not normal for me. We need to investigate what's going on. That's the point of departure, because that puts you in an empowering position. Often we go into doctors' rooms and we feel like they're the smartest person in the room, in their profession. But when it comes to you, you are the expert.
Amen.
I felt pretty
Reach,
inspired.
sister. Yes. Yes, yes, I'm inspired. So, there's a lot of people, a lot of the conversation around menopause can often feel negative, and so people are afraid of it. Like, what do you think is one of the greatest things about this part of your life that's part of the this menopausal change that's been amazing for you?
So far, I have not experienced a lot of rage, and maybe it's because as a younger woman, for the 2 weeks prior to my menstruation actually coming on, I was incredibly aggressive. I once went to my doctor and said, "I suffer from PMS," and then I corrected myself. I said, "No, everyone else around me suffers while I'm PMSing. Is there anything you can prescribe me to calm me down?" I do feel a lot calmer, and maybe that's because I'm more informed of what's going on. Of course, the HRT is definitely helping with that. It might also be like a decline in testosterone, who knows? But I that's one of the positives for me. I also do find myself a lot more emotional. At this stage, I'm gonna say it's a positive because I've not really been someone who wears their heart on their sleeve much. So it is a different experience. And I think it's made me a little bit more softer and a little bit more vulnerable. I don't know if that's anything related, but it's just where I am in my life. And I quite enjoy being a little bit softer and more emotional and just feeling a little bit more mentally, I'm going to use the word stable, but in terms of just not fluctuating, where I've always kind of fluctuated between highs and lows. This is a time that I feel more balanced. So the highs and the lows aren't as extreme as when I was younger. What about you?
We're enjoying it too. Just
Thank you,
saying, we're
sir.
loving this part of your life.
What about you?
For me, now that I realize, of course, I'm in post menopause, I like that you get to, as an adult, when you go through hormonal changes as a teenager, they just kind of happen, and you're not in it with your head and your heart. You're just following your body. We have the opportunity now to really take care of ourselves, nurture ourselves, watch what we're putting into our bodies, watch how we're showing up in the world. And so I feel like it's an opportunity to really care for ourselves more, which means in turn that how we show up in the world is very different. And I also like that in getting more comfortable in my own skin and doing the things that I need to support my body. I, although I'm less tolerant of a lot of things, and that's the gift that menopause gives you, because you just stop putting up with the bullshit around you. You just don't have time for it anymore. And that's really fun, because for someone like me, particularly, who will let people come right into my boundaries, they can push me really far before I say stop. That boundary is a little tighter, which is healthier for me. And
Yeah.
so my lovely menopause rage allows me to go enough much quicker than I could ever do when I was younger. And that is a real gift for me, showing up in the world. So that's one of the great joys, I think, that I'd like to share. And
I
as you say, I mean, we can go on for hours about this topic. Hours.
Yeah.
There's so many things to discuss. And maybe we will have a second episode once we've gotten some of the questions in from people that are watching.
100%. I mean, this episode was really just about awareness and trying to put you in a position of being able to advocate for yourself or advocate for women around you, your sisters, your girlfriends, whatever that might look like. Just sharing the information that is very much available and out there, but what people might not know or create the connection between what they're experiencing. I really enjoyed what you said about you do have less tolerance. And I think it's because you actually have less energy for certain stuff. And so you prioritize what's important to you. And part of that is making sure that you are prioritized. Whereas when we're younger, our hormones actually allowed us to put up with a lot more stuff and be a lot more giving and nurturing. And it's part of evolution. It was required for evolution, right? When we are in our childbearing years, we need to put up with a lot of stuff, such as, babies teething or keeping the family together. But as you get a little bit older and your hormones are no longer keeping you in check, and you now have this freedom to make a choice, that's where you find yourself in the ability to be able to invest in yourself, probably for the first time in your life, and make choices for yourself. Do you want to say that research does show that there's a lot more divorces that happen with women in their 40s and 50s? These divorces are often initiated by women.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
really good point that you make this. And I actually, speaking to someone the other day and mentioning that stat to them, she came back and said to me, my husband and I had been married for 30 years or whatever it was, but she says we are more in love now than we were ever. So that stat is absolutely speaking to that thing in a relationship where you change and you grow together. And so if there are men listening to this as well, it's also really important that you educate yourself on this so
Mhm.
that you can be there as a team together in this journey with your partner. Because if we grow and change and develop together, then it just becomes something really beautiful. Otherwise, the opposite may be true. So,
Yeah.
really good point.
Sis,
Okay.
in terms of packaging this episode, is there anything else that we want to speak about around awareness or advocating?
I think for me, it's not one size fits all. There is a broad protocol that would generally be used. But as you have said, Sam, over and over again, you know your body the best. There's so much information out there, but you are unique. And that's what makes you so special. Your symptoms may be unique, even if they're experienced by so many of us, they will be different to you because of your circumstances in life. Keep talking, talk to whoever you can, and just care for you. You are your biggest advocate, as my sister has been saying. That's the thought I'd like to leave.
Are you saying that I repeat myself? Is that what you're saying? That I repeat the same point? Because I just want to tell you, repetition is part of communication. It's about landing the point.
Sorry, Polly Parrot. I didn't hear you. You want to repeat that again?
Okay, listen, Miss Killian, are you asking the question as we wrap this out?
What question? What question should we ask? Why don't
Should
you
we,
ask the question wrapping out?
besides the previous worst symptom, Angela, what would you say is a symptom you could do without?
Probably needing to pee more regularly.
Bloody hell, right? I would say your body odor changes as well. I mean, there have been a couple of times where I've smelt my own armpit and gone, have I
Mhm.
become a teenage boy that I smell so bad? And I bath regularly. I bath twice a day. So there's no way for me to be smelling like this. So
It is a good one though, because actually your urine smells different, and then your body starts changing, and then you suddenly like, that's familiar, but not in a good way.
yeah.
So, oh my gosh, don't get us started.
Okay. So, I mean, we are going to watch this episode back and see if we're comfortable with putting it out. We may not be, so we might be re-recording, but
We might not
we
be
are
talking
going
about
to,
vaginal dryness and weak
yeah, I've,
bladders.
I've got to see if I'm comfortable with that. We will put resources in the show notes or as a attachment. So, thank you for listening. If you would like to email us with comments, suggestions, or feedback, you can do so at notuspod@gmail.com. You can watch us on YouTube, listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And that's all, folks.
Thank you, and thanks for the great conversation, sis. Bye, everyone.